Thanks for joining. So basically, this is a free webinar for our Azure Security Engineer. It's our very first full free webinar when it comes to cloud security, especially within the Azure and AWS field, which are the two dominant cloud fields. So the very first thing we're going to do, and right now, what you're looking at right now is still ScarStack's new website. We're looking to launch this new website next year. So I'm just going to walk you through our page over here. As you can see, under the IT training section, we have a lot of very relevant six-figure high-paying career fields, such as the Azure Cloud Solution Architect, the AWS Cloud Solution Architect, the Senior DevOps Engineers, Data Analysts, and then we have our Cloud Security Engineer here, as well as other areas such as Full Stack Developers and our FinOps Practitioner. And so right now, we're currently on the Cloud Security Engineer page. And, once this page is launched officially, you'll be able to click on your syllabus to view what the syllabus looks like, which is way below. And basically, this page gives you an introductory idea into what the Azure Cloud Security plus AWS role is all about, telling us that the Azure Security training, as a matter of fact, provides us with a comprehensive dive into cloud security, whereby participants are equipped with knowledge such as cloud security, Microsoft and AWS cloud security, CSPM, and various distinctions between cybersecurity and cloud security. Now, to get a very strong understanding, cybersecurity and cloud security are closely interrelated. As a matter of fact, right now, cloud security is at the top of its game, just because, as you know, most organizations and Fortune 500 companies, as well as medium-scaled companies, are moving to the cloud, be it the AWS, the Azure cloud, or the multi-cloud, right? So when we talk about multi-cloud, we are talking about the combination of two or more cloud infrastructures within an organization or company. So for example, a company might be using Azure and they can be using AWS as well too. And so that definition right there is what we call multi-cloud. So it also tells us that full training, especially with ScarStack solution, will bring you into learning other key cloud security concepts such as zero trust security, which is very, very key and important. Other areas are misconfiguration, DDoS attacks, SOAR, which is security orchestration and automation response, and then we have data privacy. So there's a lot to uncover, including focusing on network security, identity and access management, shortened as IAM, and then cloud governance, as well as other key areas within the cloud that we can use to secure our cloud resources. And it says we provide that specialized security measures for both Azure and AWS environments. So as we move down over here, you can see the syllabus is broken down into what? Into 8 key areas, where you have your introduction to cloud security, which covers things like Microsoft Cloud Security, introducing you to it, introducing you also to cloud security posture management, AWS cloud security in general, and then the difference between cybersecurity and cloud security. And so one of the greatest things about cloud security is that not only does it introduce you to cybersecurity in the cloud and securing your cloud, resources, it also covers cybersecurity. So you're going to be seeing a lot of cybersecurity roles that are giving you or requiring a lot of cloud security responsibilities. And that is because most of the infrastructures that organizations are protecting within what we call on-premise environment. An on-premise environment is a non-cloud environment. So most of the resources that these organizations are trying to protect, a lot of them have now moved to the cloud. And so there's that interdynamics between cybersecurity and cloud security. And with the IT training from ScarStack solution, you're getting a 75% cloud security, and then you're having that 5% cybersecurity training as well to deep dive into the most essential and key areas of cybersecurity, which is all practical, hands-on, as well as how it relates to what? Cloud security. And so another part talks about concepts in cloud security, where we talk about things like zero trust architecture. We're going to be getting into that later on. We'll talk about other things such as SOC, cloud native security, IAM, which we mentioned earlier on. We're also going to be looking at CM. CM is a very key aspect of both cybersecurity and cloud security. And that stands for, if you remember, security information and event management. We also have other key areas such as MFA, which is multi-factor authentication, double-layered architecture for enhancing security when it comes to logging into different types of resources or solutions, or even, as a matter of fact, devices as well too. And so with the concepts in cloud security, from there we then cover cyber threats and cyber threat intelligence, where we talked about things like DDoS attack, which I mentioned earlier on. We talk about misconfiguration, which I also mentioned earlier on, ethical hacking, encryption, and then you start to see some of those cybersecurity interdynamics play in over here. We also have our GRC, which is a very big part of cyber security, and that the GRC stands for governance, risk, and compliance. Okay, and then we have our identity access management, and then we now move to secured cloud resources. These are key element approaches to securing the resources we have in the cloud. Now, in a different free webinar session for an Azure cloud expert, I talked about the difference between cloud services and cloud resources, where the cloud services are the services that are available within your cloud environment, such as Azure and AWS. And these cloud services enable us to create cloud resources. So for example, if we're trying to create a database in the cloud, we will need a cloud service to what? To start up that process of creating that database in the cloud. And then by provisioning and configuring the details we need for that database, which we'll put together, we can now deploy that database. And then once that database is deployed, it now becomes available in the cloud as a resource. And so understanding the difference between the cloud service and the cloud resource and how they connect together is key and important as a cloud security engineer, or even as a Azure cloud engineer. And so by looking at things like that, we also now look at Azure network security. So this is boiling into network security within the Azure cloud environment, where we'll take a look at things like virtual network, network security groups, firewall, private links, express route, VPN gateways, NAT gateways, application gateways, and load balancers. Now, typically, the list is a little bit longer once you come into the full IT training, but because we're just trying to highlight some of the key essential areas over here without overflowing the website, we just provide the key aspects. So very, very interesting areas to cover. We also have key security operations within the Azure cloud, such as Microsoft Defender, a very, very key part of Azure, Microsoft Purview, Microsoft Sentinel, Azure Backup, which is very, very important for backing up our data in the cloud when it comes to specific cloud resources such as virtual machines. We also have other key areas like peering, which is for peering our virtual networks, Azure Advisor, as well as Network Watcher. And then we also now delve into AWS version of network and security, because remember over here, we're looking at network security in Azure, and the cloud security, especially with SCAStack solution, our training focuses not on just one cloud platform. We focus on both Azure and AWS, with more focus and concentration with Azure. And so with AWS as well too, we look at things like our VPC, which is AWS version of virtual networks in Azure. We also look at things like our security group. The security group in AWS, naturally, it is also called Network Security Group, or rather it's called Network Security Group, or NSG, within Azure. So these are very, very key and interesting concepts that once you get into the full IT training, you get a very deep understanding. But for this free webinar, of course, as well too, we're going to touch on some of these key areas. And so with that in mind, when you come down over here, you're going to see some of the key skills you're going to earn, as a cloud solution, or rather cloud security engineer with SCAR-Stack solution, such as being an expert in cloud security posture, threat modeling, your cloud architecture, application security, which basically means knowing how to secure your applications in the cloud, and then firewall, as well as web application framework, also called WAF. We also have where you gain very high level skills in zero trust model when it comes to security and cyber security, and then as well to network security, identity access, and then on these two platforms, AWS. And now the skills you're going to earn, of course, are much more than this, because as you can see, we're talking about a whole lot of dynamic areas over here. However, because we're not trying to overflow the website, we just provide you with some of the most high-level key skills that you can picture yourself, being a master in once you complete your full IT training. Some of the tools that we utilize are listed over here, such as our Azure portal, IAM Identity Center, Bastion, both in Azure and AWS, our AWS console, our command line interfaces, Entra Admin Center, and so much more. And so we have other key details down over here. But one thing I'm going to do is to navigate you back to our current website, right? So over here in our current website, we do have, this, and the current website is simply scarstacksolution.com. And so once you get over here, as you can see right over here, even with this poster, right now, starting off from January 2025, but we're launching this from December 2024. So this next coming month, we do have, basically, we've changed our training model pricing because we've had a lot of students. Right now, we're clocking close to 500 people that we've trained within just a year and a half, which is very, very awesome. And so we've had a lot of students. And so what we're trying to do is to give you a much more better pricing, and also make sure that students or candidates that come in for our training have flexibility in joining those IT trainings by ensuring that the costs are not too much, and ensuring that there's a great payment plan behind signing up for an IT training. I'm going to be breaking that down for us. So what does this mean exactly? What this means is that when you sign up for our 2 months IT training, and all our IT trainings are 2 months. So when you sign up for that 2 months IT training, basically the cost for the full training is $800, right? And then breaking that down logically, you have the first month costing $400 and the second month costing $400. And so what that means is, if you want to come into the IT training based on the payment plan, you can say, okay, I don't have the $800. I want to just first pay $400, and then the next month I'll pay the remaining $400. We allow that. We have that payment plan structure, so that it's very, very easy. We're also doing it to show, to boost confidence, right? To make you know that once you come into our training, you'll be so impressed. As a matter of fact, you would, after finishing your training, you want to come back for even a different new area. You might come in for cloud security engineer and say, wow, I really enjoyed that. I want to come in for, DevOps engineer, just to increase your knowledge. You understand? And so basically the structure of the payment is you get to pay 400 to start off the 400. If you don't want to pay the full 800 at first, you can come in for the first month, you pay your $400. And then even if you feel unsatisfied, which is why we have it over here, after the first month, even if you feel unsatisfied, you can say, oh, okay, I'm not really satisfied with the training. I don't want to join the second month. That'll be okay, but I can guarantee you, once you from the very first day of the class, we're going to be hands-on. You're going to see yourself deploying right up into the end of the first month, and you're going to be impressed. As a matter of fact, we've started seeing students that, in the past, we've seen students that came in with our initial payment plan structure that we had earlier on this year, and just 2 weeks into the training, they're paying up their balance. They're saying, hey, we're enjoying this training. It's hands-on, it's practical. They are working with real life projects. This is why we have those things here. You have your weekly practical projects listed over here. So this means at the end of each week, you have practical lab assignments that you're meant to work with that are practical, and then they have grading criteria with them. So you get to not only work on this practical labs, but get actual grading. So if you did well, but you didn't perform at 100% and you got an 80%, you're going to see your 80% score, as well as the reason why you got the 80% score. So basically giving you that validation and verification to validate your work and give you areas for what? For improvement. And so other key benefits of the full IT training are other areas such as our resume build. Thanks thanks everyone. Welcome. I see some people. Okay, that's fine. And so as I was saying, we have our resume build assist as well. So the resume build assist basically does what? It gives you the advantage of getting a resume build from SCASTAC Solution after your IT training. This is if you complete your 2-month IT training, you get given a resume so that you can have a feel of what it is to have a very professional resume that stands out amongst all other candidates so that recruiters can easily reach out to you. So we help you with building up your resume, walking you through it, and it's basically going to be based on what we've covered in our IT training, so that once you finish the IT training after 2 months, you have that 3 to 6 years experience jumping into the tech field or tech world as a cloud security engineer. One other great thing I want to also mention is we also provide mock interview preparations. What does this mean? It means after your training is completed, and this is your 2 months training. So most of this is applicable for the 2-month training, such as the mock interview preparation, your resume build, and the 2 months on the job support. So the 2 months on the job support is once you've landed a job, we support you for the first 2 months in case you have questions, about your actual job role and you need that assistance. So we're there. And then the mock interview preparation is where we actually interview you from a theoretical and practical perspective so that you are well prepared for the interviewers once you start landing your job interviews, so that you can easily and successfully ace your interviews. And these are going to be one-on-one. So you're going to be having these interviews with instructors like me, Olu, where I'll be directly asking you questions, and I'll be with you while you're also working on your practical interview session. So those are very, very key advantages. As you can see, the areas we cover, the cybersecurity analyst training we cover, the cloud solution architect we cover as well too, including DevOps engineer, cloud security engineer, data analyst, and a host of other IT trainings that we saw earlier. Now, with that in mind, let us go down over here. So I'm going to click the View IT Trainings board because I want to show you something over here. So this is what we're going to be looking at today. Our free webinar on the cloud security engineers, where we're going to be looking at all of these key areas. And as you can see, the training tells us the areas we're going to be covering today are introduction to cloud security engineering in Azure and AWS, Microsoft Sentinel, security information and event management, which we mentioned earlier on, a very key aspect, our cloud security posture, as well as our IAM, and other areas such as security orchestration, automation, and response that I mentioned earlier on, cyber threat intelligence, virtual networks, VPC, and network security. And so these are very, very key areas we're going to be covering this morning. So when I go down over here, I can see our IT trainings. And one of the very first key areas I see, thanks everyone for joining. One of the very key areas I see over here is our cybersecurity as well. Remember, we're looking at it in the new website, so you can definitely tell the difference in the website. But currently, right now, this is the website that is live, the SCASTACSolution.com. And for those just joining, thanks for joining. If you have questions, feel free to unmute your mic or raise your hands. You can also ask questions in the chat as well as we go through this session. But thanks everyone for joining. And so you can see some of the similar information we saw in the other website that we're taking a look at a few minutes ago, where we saw key areas that are covered in the IT training, such as cyber threats, ethical hacking, penetration testing, our CM, our cyber threat intelligence, also shortened as CTI, our endpoint detection response that also works closely with what we call security information and event management, as well as a host of other key areas. And then down here, you can see our pricing over here. The pricing, full pricing for the training, like I mentioned earlier on, is $800, where we have a payment plan of $400 per month. The training duration, of course, is 2 months. Delivery is over Zoom. And then you can see some of the tools over here for the cybersecurity that we talked about initially. Now, let's quickly jump into cloud security because that's our focal point. So under the cloud security area over here, we can see the price as well too that we talked about. We can see how much cloud security engineers earn, right? They earn 161,000 to about 266,000. Very, very, very awesome role with very impressive six-figure salaries. We can see some of the tools that you're going to be using during the training with ScarStack Solution. And some of them are cloud security tools. Some of them are cyber security tools. We have things like Wireshark, we have our Nessus. We also have what we call infrastructure as code, where we're able to automate deployment and management of cloud resources. But when it comes to cybersecurity, we have some of those tools there. We have Wireshark, Nessus, we have our Nmap, and a host of other few tools. And then most of all of these are what you're going to be using for your cloud security training. And so some of the certifications, the one that we've basically geared you towards certification that you will be eligible to earn once you finish your IT training is the Certified Azure Security Engineer Associate certification. Very, very key aspect. Now, typically, once you've made up your mind to enroll for the full IT training, you will click the enroll now over here to enroll. I'm just going to show us how that works. Then we'll look into the Glassdoor salary confirmation. Thanks everyone for joining. Rich, I saw you joined as well too. Thanks for joining this beautiful Saturday morning. So let's take a look at what it looks like to enroll for any of these areas. Now, when you come over here, you get you're landed on the enrollment page, and you can see other key details that I mentioned about the training. It tells you we have 2 classes per week, right? Each are 2-hour classes. They are typically during the work day. We have a 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Central Time slot, a 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Central Time slot, and an 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. So, you get to know, you're able to choose which time slot works for you for your 2 classes per week. Typically, some of these classes do get filled up. So if that happens, you'll see that will not be available for you to enroll in. So the earlier, the better to enroll in most cases. So when I click on that enroll, I can see the classes that, the time available for you to start up a new IT training. Now, our IT trainings are eligible to be started every new month, right? So we start our IT trainings every new month. So if, for example, you feel you're going to be busy this December, maybe traveling, abroad, having Christmas holidays and all, and you feel January is when you want to start, typically you select January, and it tells you we have 3 time slots over there. So typically when you select your Monday, January 6th, and you click on that, you see the available time slots, and then you're able to pick a time that works for you. So say, for example, you typically are the kind of person that goes to work, you have to commute back home. It takes a little bit of while for you to get home. The 8 to 10 p.m. might be a very good time slot for you. And then you can go ahead to select that. And once you select that, you are presented with your, being ready to check out. And so you can select that. If you wanted to just pay for your full IT training of $800, you can just go and select 2 quantities right there, and it gives you your price there. We do have a booking fee of $10 just to, that is charged towards processing all of this. And so your total right there is $820. You click that, and then you can now enter your name and all your details, and then it takes you to the payment page where you make your payment. And then once you make your payment, you immediately get an email. We also receive that email over here as ScarStack Solution, having your email and your phone number. So we reach out to you, send you a text to let you know that we've received your payment. And then in about 30 minutes to 1 hour, you get what you call your welcome package. Your welcome package is basically your details for you to start off from day one with your full IT training. So it contains things such as the Zoom link that you'll be joining, for your IT training to connect into the IT training. It's going to also contain documentations, right? Learning documentations and guide for you that you're going to be using throughout the training, and other details you need to know, such as the start time and the end date time for Zoom training. So pretty awesome and smooth, very automated process right there. I do have, for instance, I have like 2 people in this room who already have done a full IT training with me, and they are also now even interested in newer trainings like Rich. Rich has done his Azure Cloud Solution Architect, is actually working on his certification, I believe, Rich. And then now is also interested in the cloud security engineer role. So pretty interesting experience over here. So now let us jump back over here and take a quick look at the Glassdoor salary confirmation for cloud security engineers. Now, when I click on this area here, I can see the information right here on Glassdoor. And as you know, Glassdoor provides current data based on, or at least very close current data. We can see here updated June 2024, and it shows us how much cloud security engineers earn in the United States. And you can see it over there, how much does a cloud security engineer make? So they make highly significant and very, very impressive salaries over there. You can even see some of the companies that are even paying the most when it comes to cloud security engineers. You can see Apple right there, 217K to 331. So that tells you that once you're able to land some jobs in certain companies, you can even go into the 300K, space. So it's not just about 200K, depending on certain companies with your 5 to 6 years experience. And you don't necessarily have to have 5 to 6 years experience. With our IT trainings, it covers all of those areas, right? We're not just doing theoretical training over here. We're telling you what engineers in companies like this, what they're doing on their day-to-day. We're teaching you all of those tactics through our practical hands-on learning, through your practical labs. The practical labs, I always tell my students, they are very, very important. That's why you get graded, and I give you grading scores on them, so that even if you don't get 100%, most of the students, they always get 100%. Sometimes they might get 80% or thereabout, but at least your area to improvement, because those practical labs are basically opening you up to how you're going to implement all of those cloud solutions when you get your actual job. And so that's one thing I'm very proud of, and that's one thing the SCASTAC solution is unique, about when it comes to practical hands-on training. It's not just teaching you, but I'm also following up with you to ensure that you're doing your practical lab assignments, and I'm also giving you feedback based on what you've worked on. So as we can see, there are a lot of great companies out there that are basically covering what we're doing, basically giving job offers for what we're talking about right now, which is the cloud security engineer in AWS as well as in Azure. So that's what we do. We don't just focus on one key area such as Azure or AWS. We bring together these two tech giants that are occupying the cloud space, which are Azure and AWS, and we give you that 3 to 5 years practical IT experience so that you become an expert cloud security engineer at the end of your IT training. All right. So with that in mind, let us take a shift back into our focus for today. Now, our focus for today is to take a look at some key items which we've looked at over here. If I go back up over here, these are going to be the key areas we're going to be looking at today for our free IT training on cloud security engineer. We're going to be looking at these key topics. For those that are just joining us, these are the areas we're going to be looking at for the free webinar. Now, to kick that off, what I'm going to do is to jump into our slides. We're going to be we're going to be utilizing about 3 different slides over here. As you can see, we have the AWS learning guide. This is the full learning guide that I use for students that come in into the full IT training to become an AWS cloud solution architect. As you can see, when we go down over here, you can see some of this is actually the syllabus, right, for being an AWS cloud solution architect, where you get introduced to compute, where you work with EC2 instances, Elastic Beanstalk, Lambda, and the rest. And then we take a look at some little bit of AWS security. So we're going to be using this a little bit. We also have the documentation for the Azure Cloud Solution Architect. We're going to quickly look at that as well too, and then our cloud security as well too. The cloud security, this particular documentation has been structured specifically for this IT training or this IT free webinar, so that we have a clear, quick cut into the key areas that we want to cover for this particular webinar. So we're going to first start off over here. So I'm going to kick off by expanding this. And meanwhile, I know we had some other folks that just joined. So during the session, if you have questions, definitely feel free to unmute your mic to ask questions. If you feel comfortable asking via the chat as well, to do that. I'll be taking a look at the chat every once in a while to see if anyone has any question. So let's jump right into this right now. So today we're going to be looking at cloud security engineer, the free webinar on becoming a cloud security engineer in Azure and AWS, as you can see their logos over there, and knowing some of the key areas, right? There are probably, the full IT training itself probably has about 10 to 12 key areas, but we're just going to be looking briefly at 6 areas since we just have a 1 hour, 30 minutes space right there. So let's jump into it now. As we move over here for the full IT training syllabus, this is what our full IT training syllabus looks like, right? Introduction to cloud security, and then one very key area of cybersecurity and cloud security called security operations, where we're going to be looking at things like encryption, DDoS, attacks, phishing, cyber threat, intelligence, cyber threat itself, so many key areas such as EDR as well too. So we have our security operations area. We have our key concept in the cloud security, which we took a look at some minutes ago when we're looking at the SCAR Stack Solution website. Then we have cyber threat and cyber threat intelligence, identity and access management, CM, security and cloud resources, all of this good stuff. So let's jump from there to the next step. Now over here, we're basically looking at the tools and apps that you'll be utilizing, with a full training from SCAR Stack Solution. These are also some of the tools you will find yourself using even in the real world. And remember, when we're looking at the tools during the period where we're looking at my website, we saw other tools, right? Even cybersecurity tools. So the tools are longer than these, but these are some of the key tools. As you can see, there are some AWS tools there, such as the AWS CloudWatch for monitoring. We have our Microsoft Sentinel as well too, our Microsoft Entra, Cloud Shell, Terraform, and the rest. So now welcome aboard, and over here is where we start officially, right? So let's talk about the purpose of this session, right? For the purpose of this section, basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be exploring some of those essential tools we talked about earlier on, right? We're going to be exploring that, and our goal here is to help you gain a very deeper understanding of, basically what the role entails, the different types of jobs, some of the key areas for the cloud security engineer. And so that's why we see over here, some of the things will cover the key aspects, some of the core security services, as well as how to establish and maintain strong security postures in the cloud. So very, very key and important area. So now let's take a look at the next slide. So we just saw this, right? We just saw this recently where we saw different areas or different companies that are hiring cloud security engineer. It's a very top-notch field. Some of us already know that, right? Some of us that are already working in the tech field, we already know that the cloud security is one of the topmost tech roles, today. So let's take a look at some other areas. Now, these are some of the companies like we saw just a few minutes ago. We have Amazon, Microsoft, Google. We also have other people like IBM, Oracle, Palo Alto Networks. I like that company, very good company. JP Morgan and the rest. So these are some of the companies that are hiring cloud security engineers. There are a lot of them, right? But these are some of the big top players. Now, we talked about some key concepts in cloud security, and some of these key concepts are also present in cybersecurity. And that's why I said when you getting this cloud security engineer training, and just generally, cloud security is a big extension of cybersecurity in general. And so some of you already have a little bit of background or experience with cybersecurity, which you also do the IT training for. You begin to see some of those key concepts such as misconfiguration, zero trust model. They are also present in the cloud. So let us talk about some of these key concepts a bit so that we have a little bit of understanding on what's going on over there. Now, when we talk about zero trust model, basically we are operating on the principles of never trust, which is you must always verify things within the cloud. So in cloud security, this means that no user or device, whether inside or outside of your organization, right, or within its network, is inherently trusted. No one is trusted. Everything must be verified, validated before pushing forward with any key decisions. And so that means that every access request within our cloud environment is verified, authenticated, and authorized with constant monitoring. And that's why we're looking at some of the details during the syllabus, and we saw monitoring there. Monitoring in the cloud is a very, very key aspect. We just saw our AWS, where we had the AWS CloudWatch in one of the tools in the previous slide. And so you have to monitor those cloud resources even after giving verification or giving authentication to some of your cloud resources. And that's typically what Azure, or rather, that's typically what Zero Trust model covers. Now, for the next one, we have DDoS attacks, which is called distributed denial of service attack. And a DDoS attack generally can overwhelm our system or network with a flood of internet traffic. And the purpose of the DDoS attack is to what? Is to aim to disrupt normal services within our cloud environment. And as we know, organizations don't want that, right? We don't want our cloud environment crashing. And that's why security is a very key concept, because with all organizations, security, in fact, is perhaps, if not the highest goal or focus, the second or one of the topmost goal, right? If you don't have secured resources, all your customers and clients are going to be in trouble, whether you are providing services to people where they have to access critical information, or you are protecting people's data, such as a social security number or their bank information. So that's why cloud security is a very key concept, and that's why DDoS is one of those key concepts within the cloud that are taken very seriously. And so with DDoS, cloud providers such as Azure and AWS offer us with some built-in DDoS tools to help prevent some of these DDoS attacks that can attack our system. All right. So now let's talk about one other key aspect over here, which is misconfiguration. Misconfiguration typically occurs in our cloud environment when our cloud resources are set up incorrectly. So for example, you're meant to create something that should have 5 or key cloud security steps, and then you misconfigure that by missing out 2 or 3 of those key steps, right? What happens there? If one step is meant to ensure that only authorized users are meant to access that cloud resource, and you miss that step, that is called a misconfiguration. Basically, what you've just done is you've just exposed that cloud resource to attacks, different types of attacks in the cloud. And that's why misconfiguration, even though it sounds very simple and it might not be an external or inside attack, it's basically like us attacking our own self, right? A cloud resource that is meant to be created and only meant to be accessed by some key people, such as the CTO, which is the Chief Technology Officer, the Chief Information Officer, the general manager, is now being accessed by different kind of people. That is called misconfiguration. And so examples like that, which you just mentioned, can be such things like insecure storage buckets, right? Let's say you're creating an AWS bucket, which is basically like a cloud storage, and you don't configure that correctly, that can be a problem. So in that case, for example, if you give more access than needed, that could also be an issue. So because of that, misconfiguration still remains one of the top causes of cloud security breaches. And that's why we must always be cognizant of that when we are provisioning and configuring, as well as maintaining our cloud security as a cloud security engineer. Ensuring that we are not misconfiguring our cloud resources is very, very important. Now, another key area is landing zones. Now, landing zones over here are basically defined as pre-configured cloud environments, right? That can provide a secure, scalable foundation for deploying some of our workloads in the cloud. Now, what does this exactly mean? This means you're going into your cloud environment to deploy a resource based on a specific already configured service or script that you can utilize, right? So landing zone is very, very key and important. One of the key advantages of landing zones is that when you're using a landing zone resource to minimize errors such as DDoS attacks or misconfiguration, certain companies will already have some of these security measures pre-configured, right? So think about it from a non-security aspect. I'm trying to give an example that people generally within the tech or tech would understand. So a pre-configured environment or resource or device could be, for example, your Windows computer, right? So when you buy your Windows computer, when it comes, it's already pre-configured with certain applications, right? You've got your Microsoft Edge there, you've got your Microsoft Word. You probably need to activate that with a subscription. You've got some of these general things that are already on your computer. And that is just an example, in the cloud space, right? So landing zones can be defined as those pre-configured cloud environments that ensure that we are providing, at some level, a secure and scalable foundation for deploying. So they are, and it's very important to know that they are designed to ensure consistent security, right? So Windows, in that example I gave to you, by Windows ensuring that everybody has Microsoft Edge, they are doing what? They are ensuring consistency in people being able to easily access the website once they get into their new computer, right? And those are just their pre-configured ones. Now, when you now want other things like Google Chrome, then you now have to do what? You now have to download that by yourself. So landing zone is another very key aspect. One next one I want to talk about is shared responsibility model. Very, very, very important. And thanks, guys, for joining. I see more people are joining. For those that just joined, if you have questions, definitely feel free to unmute your mic to ask questions. If you also want to ask your questions via the chat, do that as well too. We'll be taking note of, our chat as we are going on with this. All right. So with that in mind, let me jump back over here. Sorry, I was just giving some more people access to join in here. And so we've talked about some of these few things, right? Now let's try to skip over here a bit. Let's talk about, let's talk about our cloud native security, and then we'll go to the next slide. So because, we have just limited time, so we can't cover all of these definitions. Now, when we talk about cloud native security, this involves us integrating security practices and tools directly into our cloud environments by using different types of solutions that are, I'll say, generally designed for the cloud, right? So they are definitely designed for the cloud. And one great advantage about cloud native security is that it's an approach that leverages different unique features of cloud platform, such as automation, scalability, and containerization. The advantage of cloud native security is that it can provide a robust environment for us. And what does this really mean generally? Now, for those of us who are already used to the Azure environment, your cloud native security could be, those general and I would say very important items within the cloud, things that you can't avoid, right? Like governance, management, and infrastructure within the cloud. Those are called our cloud native security. Things like infrastructure as code also are known as cloud native security. And then we have other ones such as our security operations, which is a practice that integrates security into IT operations. We have our security operations center over here. It is basically a centralized team that is responsible for helping, for monitoring, detecting, analyzing, and responding to security incidents in the cloud. So with that in mind, let's jump to the next item over here. So over here, we can see some of those security operations we listed, right? We're already a little bit familiar with them. So today, these are the items we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at introduction to security engineering, cloud security job titles and certifications, security information and event management, identity and access management, cloud security posture management, Microsoft Sentinel, and SOAR, which we mentioned earlier on, CTI and virtual network. So a lot of interesting things we're going to be diving into over here. Now, let's kick off over here, right? What is cloud security engineering, right? Cloud security engineering involves protecting a company's cloud-based data and infrastructure from security threat. As simple and as straightforward as you can define it, right? Protecting your company or organization's cloud-based data in the cloud. It then goes on to tell us that cloud security engineers specifically focus on protecting data, managing identity, and securing network traffic, especially in the cloud, or in certain cases in the cloud and on-premises, right? We've mentioned on-premises before, but these are specifically in cases where we have a connection between our on-premises network and our cloud, which can be done, for example, in the Azure environment. You can establish connection and transfer of data or details within your on-premises and the cloud using tools or technologies such as express routes or VPN gateway as an example in your Azure cloud environment. So those are very, very key things to pay attention to. Some of the key aspects in Azure and key aspects in Azure and AWS solution or security engineering is security management, right? We've talked about that, security management, protecting sensitive data, ensuring that you're giving the right access to people and resources, and also ensuring compliance within the organization. So we have other things like service utilization as well, where you take use of, or where you make use of things such as your Azure Security Center, your Microsoft Defender, AWS Security Hub. So basically using these key services, because we talked about services earlier on, right? Cloud services and cloud resources. So that's another key aspect, utilizing those service tools or service utilizations within the cloud to consistently ensure security within the organization in its cloud environment. So over here, we have some examples of some job titles in the cloud, right? So one of the most popular ones is the cloud security engineer, right? One of the most popular one. We also have the cloud security architect. And for those who were in my other free webinar on becoming an Azure cloud solution expert, that is a different field. You remember we talked about the cloud solution architect and the cloud administrator, right? So the same role is similar over here, where the cloud security engineer and the cloud security architect have a lot in common in their roles. However, the cloud architect has more, or is expected to do a little bit more, especially when it comes to architecting the cloud solutions that we deploy, as well as the cloud solutions that have already been deployed, right? Knowing how to structure the cloud environment. Say, for example, you want to build a very robust virtual machine, knowing the best decision to make, whether you want to create a virtual machine availability zone or virtual machine skill set, and then knowing the right architecture in terms of, okay, do we want to implement what we call an application security group for this? And then how do we create our network security group, embed our network interface into that network security group, embed what we call our subnet into that network security group, as well as embed what we call, of course, our application security group into that, right? And then now creating our virtual network separately so that we can combine within our virtual machine skill set. We can put in a load balancer, we can plug in our network security group that we've created that probably has, because network security group is a very, very important thing. We generally call them security group, especially when we're talking in terms of Azure and AWS, right? The network security group provides very robust inbound and outbound traffic. What does that mean? That means in the cloud, when you implement a security group, you are basically and specifically deciding what resources have access into that your cloud resource, and what cloud functions within your cloud resources has the ability to go out to connect to other people, right? So think about it in a layman's perspective or example. Say I have a home, right? And I want to provide security to my home. I'm not just having a home that is simple. I have cameras that are out there, right? Protecting it. But more importantly, as an example, the versions with security group, I have bouncers, right? I have security guards that have a list of only people that can come into my home, right? So you come, you say you want to see someone, they check you on the list, right? That can be an example of an inbound security, where they're trying to come in, but you are protecting and you're restricting people that have access to your home. In this case, you're restricting people that have access to your resources in different perspective and different ways. And then there's the outbound too, where when someone wants to go out, right? Say you're the president or your vice president, and you want to ensure that when your kids are going out, they're not just going out without no security, right? They're trying to go out of the home, right? That is outbound. And so you're creating security measures to say, oh, where are you trying to go to? We have a party. Oh, no, during this week, you cannot go to the other part. That is outbound security right there, outbound traffic, right? You are protecting something from going out to a specific place or resource to ensure some certain consent or security principles. And so that's the example of what security group does. And so as a cloud security architect, you'll be having much more of those responsibilities, playing a little bit more key rules in decision making. And in some cases, some companies might not care, right? They can call this an cloud security architect, but your role might be as simple as an engineer. And some engineers too, they might come in and they might be doing some of those rules of the architect, but in general, they are all encompassing and they are all interrelated. We also have things like our IAM specialists. Remember, we talked about IAM. This is probably like the 8th or 9th time we are seeing IAM. That tells you IAM is very, very key and important when it comes to cloud security as well as cyber security, which is closely related. And remember, I told you with the full IT training as a cloud security engineer with SCAR solution, you are also gaining, as you're getting your cloud security knowledge, you're also gaining cyber security knowledge, right? And then you're not just gaining in one cloud, you're gaining this IT training in a multi-cloud environment. You're covering AWS and Azure together. So it's a full-blown package all put together in just one simple immersive IT training, and the cost is very, very affordable. And so we look at other areas, and thanks others for joining. If you have questions as we go through this, feel free to unmute your mic. You can also ask questions through the chat. I'll be checking that as we go through this. So we have other roles such as the cloud solutions engineer. I want you to pay attention to that because with many companies, they put solutions in place of security. So whenever you're seeing a cloud solutions engineer, in some companies, they're actually talking about cloud security engineer. So that is very, very important for you to know. So with us registering all of this job security or job titles in cloud security, let's move to the next slide. Now, let's talk about the cloud security certification. Now, with the training from SCAR Solution itself, what we do is through our training and based on the structure of our training syllabus, we look to ensure that you can badge the certified cloud security professional called the CCSP, as well as the Azure Security Engineer Associate. So by getting the full IT training from us, you get to easily and confidently get and gain this tool, right? But again, this slide is just providing you generally all of the major different types of cloud security. These are the two most important ones, and that's why our training and syllabus is structured and focused around them. So that if you want to get the certification in addition to your practical hands-on IT training, you'll be confident and comfortable going out to get those certifications. But apart from that, other certifications that are out there are like the IBM Cloud Security Engineer and the AWS Certified Security certification as well. So let's talk about CM right now, right? We've talking about CM all this while, which is basically security information and event management. This is basically a tool within the cloud resource that can be one or more tools, right, within your cloud environments, which enable you to successfully gather and monitor as well as analyze different security data or information within your environment, right? And in the case of a multi-cloud environment, you could be using one or two tools in the Azure environment to do all of those analyzing, monitoring, gathering, and then in AWS, you could be doing the same as well too, right? So in AWS, you could be using tools like CloudWatch. In Azure, you could be using tools like Microsoft Sentinel to achieve that. In Azure environment, to first use Microsoft Sentinel, you need to provision, configure, and deploy something we call a log analytics workspace. This log analytics workspace is very, very special because it provides logging details, right, that Microsoft Sentinel over here can use to work in gathering, analyzing, and monitoring security-related information. And one of that key thing, CM tools, they provide real-time insight, right? So they're not looking at stale data, though you can always go back to track previous data, but you'll be monitoring and analyzing real-time data. So let's take a look at Microsoft Sentinel for cloud security. It tells us some of the key features it covers is threat detection, right? So by implementing and using Microsoft Sentinel in the Azure cloud environment, you get that artificial intelligence smartness that is able to help us detect threats faster than our own normal human intervention or way in doing that. So that's one very key detail, or rather key function of Microsoft Sentinel, that threat detection capability, as well as investigation and hunting, right? So it's not just detecting, but it's also hunting, right? And that's how cybersecurity and cloud security work. We call them being defensive and offensive, right? So in our training, that's the monologue we follow, right? Or the concept we follow. That's our motto: defensive and offensive. Defensive is where you're preventing, or you're safeguarding the organization's infrastructures and cloud resources. And then offensive is you going out there to go and monitor who are the enemies that would want to either attack you in the future or near future, or currently in the process of doing that to your organization. And so that is very, very important investigation hunting. So we also have automated response over there. But let's jump into the next slide. Over here, you can see an example of what Microsoft Sentinel looks like within our Azure environment, right? So we have the Microsoft Sentinel page that can use threat management tools like incident workbooks, hunting. You saw that word right over there that we just mentioned, right? And our threat intelligence. So you're able to use those tools to do what? To successfully configure different tools for monitoring, observability, analysis, and data gathering. And for those who have done my Azure Cloud Solution Architecture, and I see about 2 of them over here, you'll see that we've used workbooks and a few of all of these tools. And so it provides you unified visibility as well as enhanced compliance for your cloud infrastructure. Now, we're talking about Microsoft Sentinel, right? The reason why Microsoft Sentinel is closely related to SIEM and SOAR is because when we talk about security information and event management, that is what Microsoft Sentinel does, right? So someone asks you, give me an example of a SIEM tool within the cloud. One of the key things you want to mention is Microsoft Sentinel, right? And one of the way it achieves its goal or presents its goal is through security orchestration, automation, and response. That's why it tells us Microsoft Sentinel is a scalable cloud-native solution that does what? That provides these key definitions or terminologies in the cloud. So let's kind of move a little bit. Now, we're now going to talk about cloud security posture management, right? And so over here, it tells us cloud security posture management tools continuously monitor cloud environments to detect misconfigurations, compliance risk, and vulnerability, right? And it's shortened for CSPM. One of the key terminologies you need to know as a cloud solution, cloud security engineer. And so it tells us some of the CSPM tools and features in Azure and AWS are like the Azure Security Center, right? This is a security center space within the Azure environment that can provide us with what? Secure score assessment, compliance tracking, as well as vulnerability management. And so that tells us that the cloud security posture management deals with how you posture your cloud resources from a security standpoint, as well as how you utilize those tools in Azure and AWS effectively to deliver, protect, as well as ensure consistent security of your cloud environment. And so we have some of those tools, such as the Azure Security Center, that we'll technically use during our full IT training so that you know how to use the Azure Security Center, as well as things like the AWS Security Hub, which is AWS own key CSPM space for that. And then things like risk management, right? Identifying and remediating cloud security risks proactively, right? Not just when you are attacked, but you also perform proactively by performing offensive measures and mechanisms to eliminate or reduce threats in the cloud. All right, so over here, we'll go deep into CSPM because CSPM is very, very important. And, when you throw it out there, it looks like a big buzzword. You understand? So that's why we first took a look over here at, key highlight areas, right? Azure Security Center. But now we're going to look a little bit. And for some of us that are already, that have already taken our full IT training, some of these things, you'd see that you've worked on them already. So some of those key cloud security posture management are areas like identity and access management that we've mentioned a lot already this morning. The Microsoft Defender for Cloud as well, which we talked about earlier on, is an inbuilt tool in there within the Azure environment for defending and protecting our cloud resources. And so it tells us that Azure, from the perspective of Azure Cloud, CSPM or Azure provides a wide range of security services, right? Because these are basically security services that help us or helps our organization to maintain a very strong standpoint when it comes to cloud security posture. And that is all the gist. That's what cloud security posture is. Look at that again. That helps organization maintain a strong cloud security posture. Cloud security posture is kind of like your cloud security standpoint. How well do you stand in terms of your infrastructures and platforms in the cloud? And that's what that basically is talking about. So over here, as an example, in the Azure environment, we have the Azure, we have the identity and access management, which we mentioned earlier on, the Microsoft Defender for Cloud, data protection tools, such as our Azure Key Vault, right? For those who have done full IT training with us, you already know what that is, right? Securely creating things like certificates and all of that, and keys and secrets. You can see them being mentioned here, keys, secrets, and certificates, and locking them up in an Azure Key Vault, as well as using things like Azure Disk Encryption. We also have our network security that we looked at earlier on at the beginning of this training, where we talked about areas such as DDoS, right? We talked about virtual networks, as well as VPC when it comes to AWS. And then we talked about network security group, which we just talked about just recently, right? We talked about what inbound and outbound traffic, where I give you that example of, determining what is able to gain access to your resources and what you want your resources to have the capability to reach out to, right? Where I give example of the home and, allowing kids to go in or out, things like that. And so with that in mind, let us jump into the next area here. So this place covers some of the key importance of using CSPM, right? Our cloud security posture management. And so that is very, very important. So, it's not just, someone asks you, what are some of the CSPM services, in AWS or Azure, you're able to mention, but you have to also understand the general concept of CSPM and it's some of its goal, right? What is the goal? What is the aim? What is the benefit of using CSPM? And that is what is covered over here. It tells us some of its importance or benefits, or you can even use the word goal, is what? Performing discovery and visibility, right? Discovering new threats, discovering new ways to protect your cloud services, discovering new ways to attack outside resources that are trying to harm your cloud environment. The other key areas, right? We talked about misconfiguration earlier on, managing, as well as remediating once you've had an attack or incidents issue within the cloud. Then what? Continuous threat detection, continuously monitoring, continuously protecting, and constantly creating services or landing zones that protect as well as ensure consistent security within your organization's cloud environment. So we have some of all of those cool stuff. So that's a very, very key thing in the cloud security field. So now we're going to look at IAM, right? We've talked about identity and access management a lot, and now we're going to deep dive into it just a little bit. And so over here, it tells us that identity and access management in the cloud is the backbone of security in Azure and AWS. What is this telling us exactly? It is telling us that identity and access management is a key word that is used across all cloud platforms. So whether you're working with Azure or AWS or Google Cloud Platform or Oracle Cloud, identity and access management is a standardized word out there in so many diverse technological and business fields that is meant to what? Be the backbone for security in many cases. This means identity and access management is mainly that guy that can ensure that, for example, in a cloud environment, you have cloud resources that are giving only the right users the ability to access those resources, as well as limiting or broadening their roles. So for example, I can create a cloud resource in the cloud and say John Doe should only have access to 5 resources. Jane Doe should have access to 10 resources. Now, with Jane Doe's access to the 10 resource, I can use identity and access management to track what she's doing with those resources. I can also limit what she can do with those resources. I can say She only has reading capabilities or read capabilities. That's view capabilities. Out of those 10 resources, she should only be able to read or view 5 of them. She should not have the ability to edit them. She should not have the ability to delete them. She should not have the ability to give anybody any roles on them. Then I can say the remaining 5, she can have access to do that. I can even give her a level of access or role for her to be able to create other new users within the cloud and give them or assign them roles. I can say in John Doe's case, out of the 5 resources he has, he can read and edit 2 of those resources. He can even delete 2 of those types of resources. The remaining 3, he only has reading capability. He can only read or view them. I can now say out of those 3, one of them, he can have access to log in remotely into that resource, such as a virtual machine or an AWS and EC2 instance, right? I can give all of those tools. All of those magic happen with what? Identity and access management. Now, in the case of Azure, right, that used to be called Azure Active Directory in the past, but now it is called Azure Entra ID or Microsoft Entra ID, right? And then in AWS too, we have what we call the AWS IAM and Identity Center. These are platforms for managing your identity and access management, such as the AWS IAM Identity Center. In Azure, we call it Entra ID Admin Center, right? And then we have this technology here that we call the role-based access control. This is the main engine behind role permissions and role assignments, as well as scopes of role assignments in the cloud, especially when it comes to the Azure environment, right? And so it enables you to give those roles and privileges that we just talked about a minute ago. We also have other key things when it comes to identity and access management, such as multi-factor authentication, right? When we talk about multi-factor, some of us already know these things, right? There's enable multi-factor authentication, such as, for example, you're trying to log in, right? And they said, well, okay, it's not just about username and password, right? What you're now going to do is you're going to do what? You are going to perform a multi-factor authentication. Oh, we've just sent this pin to you. If truly you're the actual user of this resource or this device or this application or platform that you're trying to access, go and provide us with those 4-digit PIN that we just sent to you. You provide it, they authenticate you. That's an example of a multi-factor authentication. Now, we also have other features like single sign-on. We also have things like passwordless authentication too. In the full IT training, we typically will cover all of these key areas, okay? Now, we're talking about why IAM is important, right? One of the key details, just like what we just mentioned, prevention of unauthorized access, right? You don't want people that are not meant to be accessing things to be what? To be accessing things, right? A centralized control to be able to create certain groups of roles and say, okay, this group right here, right? I don't want to be adding this person individually and saying don't have this role. I can just say, I can create a group and say this group is for people who are meant to access these 5 roles. And then I can put a new user into that group. Thereby, when I look at that group, I know that everybody in this group are the people that I did what? That I give certain roles. I can then change that from a generalized, central or centralized perspective. And that's why we're talking about things like centralized control. Now, as an example over here, we are seeing in this image here, this is a virtual machine, like a supercomputer in the Microsoft Azure environment, right? And then we can see that we're using this feature that is called an access control, where we can now do what? We can now add a new user and assign them roles to what? To this virtual machine, which is a cloud resource. So if I wanted John Doe to be able to access this virtual machine, I can now use the add feature here to add John Doe as a user, and then I can now choose the specific role assignment that I want to give him. Thereon and later on, once that role, the necessary roles have been assigned to John Doe, I can now go under role assignment here to take a look at all of the users that have given role assignments to or that have role assignments. If I want to go, I can go over here to look at all the major roles, types of roles that are available. There are so many types of roles you can give people. And so that's kind of an example of how identity and access management works. And so we're going to briefly look into SOAR before we look at some practical approaches into being a cloud security engineer. Now, the SOAR, or Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response, generally is a tool or is a concept that integrates tools and processes, right, to automate security operations, response, and threat intelligence. And as we saw earlier on, we saw Microsoft Sentinel in Azure as an example that delivers CM and SOAR capabilities, right? And so when we talk about SOAR capabilities in Azure and AWS, we look at things like Azure Logic Apps, which is a very cool tool in the Azure environment that basically creates automation and response to certain actions, right? You can create a certain thing and say, oh, alert this set of people once this happens. Send this type of email once this particular action happens. So it's kind of like a firing or trigger event within the cloud, right? And in AWS, we have what we call step functions. So, with all of that, we're going to move into the next slide so that we can save some time here. We also have our cyber threat intelligence that involves gathering and analyzing data to, anticipate potential cyber threats. We've talked a little bit about this earlier on. Some certain examples of some CTI tools in Azure and AWS. For example, in AWS, we have what we call AWS Guard Duty that provides real-time information, right, in terms of detecting various types of threats, right? Potential threats, mid-level threats, just based on configurations and then general default expected resolutions towards our cloud environment, right? And then we have some of the benefits of CTI, such as enhanced awareness, right? So because of this, some of these things are automated, they are pre-configured. Of course, we can always go in and perform custom configurations, but that creates what an enhanced awareness is, not just human operational awareness. It's all about that artificial intelligence, that machine learning capability that has been put into some of these cloud resources to enhance the security measures and security approach towards what? Protecting our cloud security or our cloud resources for more secured environments within the cloud. So let's move next so we can see some examples of cyber threats and cyber threat intelligence tools. Some of them are even cybersecurity stuff, right? So we have some of our cyber threats, such as distributed denial of service attack, malware, phishing, and ransomware, supply chain attacks, insider threats, and then some of all of this cool stuff. And then we have the cyber threat intelligence tools that we can use to do what? Use to prevent all of these problems from happening. You understand? Ethical hacking, data privacy, intrusion, encryption, ensuring that our data is encrypted by using encrypting tools, right, to protect our encrypted data to lessen threats within our cloud or cyber environments. So where we're going to start off before we now jump into the practical perspective over here is what? Understanding virtual networks, right? We've talked about virtual networks a little bit earlier on, but virtual networks generally, or as they are called in AWS, VPCs, allow us to what? To create an isolated environment for our cloud resources. It also ensures that our cloud securities can communicate with each other within the cloud or even over the internet. Another great advantage of virtual networks, it provides private communication between our cloud resources in our cloud environment, especially within our organization. So for example, if I want cloud A to securely and privately communicate with cloud B without being exposed to other resources in the cloud, we can achieve that with virtual networks. So it's a very, very key and integral part of allowing cloud resources to communicate either privately or thereabout within the cloud. And then we've talked already about other key areas such as the network security group. The subnets work very closely with our VPCs, which is our virtual private cloud. That's what it's called in AWS, virtual private cloud, or virtual networks in Azure. The subnets work very, very closely with our what? With our virtual networks to ensure that we have segmented network structures within a virtual network. So when we're creating a virtual network, the virtual network can have multiple subnets, right? The subnets create segmented or proportioned or separate areas within our virtual networks. And this can be useful in things like creating virtual network peering, right? Peering two virtual networks together, where you typically virtual network one would have a different subnet, and then In virtual network 2, it's going to have a subnet as well too, but then you have to aggregate the space to make sure that they're not in the same address space area. You understand? And so again, for those that come into the full IT training, they get a full practical approach in knowing how we actually implement some of these concepts that have been discussed. But do know that within our address space of our virtual network, the subnet themselves also use IP address spaces as well too, but they are basically there to create multiple subnet segmentations that can be used for different purposes within our virtual network. Even our virtual network can also have a subnet in form of an Azure Bastion, right? Azure Bastion or Bastion in general, either in Azure or AWS, is a secured way to accessing your cloud infrastructures, such as your virtual machines or EC2 instances within the cloud environment. So you can deploy an Azure Bastion or AWS Bastion, and those types of cloud resources use a subnet. So I can create one subnet that the virtual network would use by default. I can create another subnet again inside that same virtual network by way of using it for a Bastion functionality. And so the virtual network can pretty much work with multiple subnets within it. Very, very interesting concept. Over here, we see an example of an AWS environment over here. As you can see, this is my environment over here, SCADAstack solution. And we can see a virtual private cloud over here that has been deployed. We can see over here within our VPC dashboard, we can see a space to look at our subnets, the other key areas or concepts such as route tables, internet gateways, endpoints, NAT gateways. You remember all of these things, we saw them. Peering, I just talked about virtual network peering connections right there. You understand? We talked about security groups. That's security groups right there. And so when we look at this virtual private cloud resource that was successfully deployed, we can see it's available. We can see some of the other key information about it, such as the name of the route table, right? So if I go into this route table over here, I'll see one of these route tables that exists, and then that route table will also let me know that that route table is being used by our virtual private cloud. And so that is how it works. Now, in AWS, we have what we call our default virtual private cloud and our non-default. So non-default are basically more advanced virtual private clouds or virtual networks that can be utilized, right, for specific purposes. And this is different from the default VPC. So when you're deploying some virtual machines, for example, you could, in some cases, you can use the default VPCs, but in most organizations, they mostly make use of non-default virtual private cloud, which is provisioned and configured a little bit differently than the default virtual private cloud. For example, a non-default virtual private cloud will need things like our route tables, our internet gateways, and a host of few other configurations, right? So basically, that's just the construction there. Now, when you look, well, I'll just pay attention to this resource map. So when we're creating a virtual private cloud, you see that it shows us our Azure, our AWS. You can see it calls it the AWS virtual network. And that is it right there. It now tells us that that virtual network uses what? One subnet. And then that one subnet has one route table, right? And they all are connected under a network connection over here. It also utilizes an internet gateway as well. So, the structuring, the configuration of these things, they're very, very nice. Once you create them, you can actually even view the architecture to see how some of these things work. So that's something that's a very, very key aspect of security in the cloud when it comes to network security. Your virtual networks, your network security groups, your subnet, as well as other key areas such as your firewall and firewall manager, right? We all know the word firewall, right? We have them in the cloud as well. So with that in mind, let me see some of the other things we have over here. Okay, so let's just take a look at this one over here, right? So this again is a virtual network, but this is a virtual network in what? In the Azure cloud environment. And so in this case over here, we are taking a look at Azure's own version of virtual network because we just saw an example of virtual network in the AWS environment. And then over here too, again, in my cloud environment here in Azure SCADAstack, you can see that this is a virtual network that was deployed And if we were to go over here under subnet, we'll see the subnet. Remember I talked about Bastion earlier on. You can access it. You can see it as DDoS. We talk about DDoS, right? Distributed denial attacks. We also talk about what? Firewall. You can see all of our configurations for this virtual networks, right? I can look at the Microsoft Defender for Cloud details over there as well too. We talked about peerings, right? I can look at the peering state of that virtual network if I configure and deploy a peering for it. So very, very interesting concept over here. And it sounds funny, right? Because you see me saying all of those things, right, theoretically, and then when you look at it over here, you can start seeing all of those things live and direct. And don't worry, we're going to take a look at it very shortly right now. So these are just some examples over here of some cloud security jobs, right? So let's take a look at just some of them. Okay, so this is a job role for Microsoft itself. Definitely, this would be paying a whole lot of good money, right? So you're going to start seeing some of those things we talked about, right? Remember when I told you that in some companies, they call cloud security cloud solutions, right? Let us not forget that. I'm just going to quickly jump back over here and click an escape button over here so that we'll go up over there and I'll jog our memory very, very, very fast. Let's find that. I think that should be somewhere here, right? I mentioned it, your cloud solutions engineer or whatever they want to call it. But that word is key, right? Some people say solutions and some people say security. So that's one thing you should pay attention. Why am I mentioning that? So that in case you're looking at job roles and you see solutions and you ignore it, right? So it's actually security, right? And so in this case over here, you can see over here, you see some of those keywords we've been talking about, right? Identity and access management, right? All the words we've been talking about, of course, cloud security, what? Threat protection, right? Being offensive in terms of securing your cloud resources. You can see some of all of this what you just mentioned, right? I told you when we're talking about identity and access management, I mentioned Entra ID, right? They are still using some companies still use the old word Azure Active Directory. That is simply because some of them are just used to that word, right? And they know that that's a word that most people use. And so in reality, Azure Active Directory does not really exist anymore. They've changed that word into Microsoft or Microsoft Entra ID, right? If I just look at my cloud space over here right now, if I type Azure Active Directory, you see that? Let's go back a little bit. You can see that it brings out Microsoft Entra ID to me. It's searching, right? But so, say someone has not caught up, they're working with the old organization that does not have an updated version of the Azure portal, right? So it tells you when you search for that, it knows already you are trying to look for their old naming convention and it brings out the exact thing that you're looking for. Okay, so let's jump back over here. Move this a little bit. So that's what's going on. That's why I mentioned that. We talked about Sentinel, right? We've been seeing Microsoft Sentinel. We talked about it extensively when we're talking about CM tools. You can see that Microsoft is looking for someone that has that skill, right? We see our Microsoft Defender for cloud again, right? That we've mentioned a few times. We see that right there. So by the time you start to see that, you'll be seeing all of those things right there. You see well-architected framework, understanding well-architected framework. That's what it's called in Azure. In AWS is called well-architected tool, right? Understanding the architectural design of well-architected framework or well-architected tool is very, very important. If I switch back over here to our PowerPoint, and do I have that over here? Okay, I'm not sure I have it over here. But if I were to scoop over to this place right here and I typed well-architected, I'm going to move one more step, right? You can see in the case of Azure, right? Azure's well-architected framework. You can see understanding those pillars, right? When it comes to a reliable cloud environment, optimizing cost in your cloud environment, ensuring performance is on par, right? Securing your cloud environment and overall ensuring operational excellence. Those things I have very important. Okay, sure, no problem. Okay, yeah, sure, no problem. And then, so that's kind of how all of this works, right? So let me take this down. Now, let's take a look at AWS right here. And if I come over here and I do a search over here, right? well architected. AWS well architected framework. Let's move one more step. You see it as well too. So you can see that the well architected tool or framework is a very important and key concept within the cloud environment. And so understanding that is very, very important. That's why you have that listed over there. Other things, governing, we talked about governance, right? Within the cloud, we can take a look at the area over here that shows you some of the key things or technologies you want to use, right? So it tells you understanding network operations, and some of all these other key details. They're all listed over here. Let's quickly take a look at other key areas, right? You see some of those things listed over here again: cloud security, Azure Active Directory, technologies like conditional access, right? Which is falls under identity and access management. So that's just one example over there. Let's quickly just take a look at one more example over here under some cloud security job types. Shift J over here. All right. So let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at Palo Alto. Actually, that's a very good company. All right. So this is a cloud security engineer role as well too, right? So let's take a look at some of the technologies they're using, right? And some of the key requirements. Over here, it tells us, you see the word we talked about firewall, right? So as a senior cloud and firewall engineer, you are meant to work with their InfoSec team. InfoSec is information security team to secure and deliver their cloud resources, right? And you can see they use words like cybersecurity. That's why I say cloud security and cybersecurity. One other great thing about joining the cloud security role is that when you join the cloud security role, right? You do your IT training, you've done your work well, and you're now a cloud security engineer. You are not only eligible for a cloud security engineer role, you are also eligible for a lot of cybersecurity role. So that is one of the greatest benefits of being a cloud security engineer. And so you can see over here, we talked extensively about zero network model, right? So you can see it over here. You can see the company is requiring you to understand the importance of that. You can see our SOAR, right? Security orchestration and automation response, right? We can see all of those things we talked about being displayed all over these places. So that is very, very important. That's why I said, by the time you go to those IT trainings and you start applying for these jobs, you're going to see all of those things in there, right? Over here, they have things like our VPN. We talked about VPN gateway, right? We talked about networking, right? Our IP addresses. What else did we talk about? Just a whole lot of other things in here. Our cloud infrastructures. We talked about load balancers, right? That we use for our virtual machines and other key aspects. So that just gives you a little bit of idea. You can see over here, this company, for example, works in a multi-cloud environment using AWS, Azure, and Google platform. So that's just a little bit of example for you to know exactly, how your training can relate to you seeing some of all these job roles. Okay. So now with all of that in play, let us close that and let's take a look at some practical approach over here. So over here, what am I looking at? I'm in my Azure cloud environment, and right now I'm taking a look at a virtual machine. Right? So this virtual machine has been successfully deployed. And if I want to take a look at what is going on with this virtual machine, right? What type of resources is it working with to ensure that it's functioning properly? One of the key things it's working with is a virtual network, right? The virtual machine is a virtual network for it to function and communicate with other resources, as well as it's working remotely as well to some certain capacity. Now, if I look over here, I can see the virtual network that is associated with this virtual machine. So when I click on that virtual network, I'm being brought into the virtual network environment, right? I can now set up and configure things like our DDoS protection that we talked about. I can even configure an Azure firewall into this virtual network, right? The Azure firewall protects and provides an extra layer of protection to our virtual network. We talked about peering earlier on, right? I can also configure a peering to ensure that this virtual network is able to seamlessly connect to another virtual network. You can see all of those things, even the Microsoft Defender and private endpoints. Now, if I want to go and take a look at the subnets that are under this virtual network, let's take a look at that. If I come down and I extend this right here, I can go under our subnets. And I can see that we have just one subnet here using this address space. And this subnet is available to use over 250 IPs. Now, I have a virtual machine that we were taking a look at just a second ago. And for me to access this virtual machine, I can use what we call an RDP connection, but I want to use a more secured way to access my virtual machine. So in this case, I want to deploy an Azure Bastion. Now we have just one subnet. I remember we talked about the virtual network being able to have multiple subnets. So I can go over here. I can say that the purpose for my subnet is not to use it as a default subnet for my virtual network. No, I want to go for something else. I can go for an Azure Bastion, a virtual network gateway, route server, firewall, but in this case, I want to deploy an Azure Bastion. So I'm going to select Azure Bastion here. Now it is asking me for something that we call an IPv4 address range, which it needs, right? And from here, I can select, if I have multiples, I can select that, right? But over here too, I can decide to change my starting address. But for now, we're going to use this default address. Now, we're only using just an IPv4, you understand? We're not using this in this case for the Azure Bastion, it specifically uses the IPv4 address. Now, if I wanted to configure much more security, or I wanted to perform certain uses for this particular virtual subnet, right, other than the Azure Bastion, I can set up a NAT gateway over here. But for now, we're not going to get into that, right? Because the NAT gateway is especially more useful when we are dealing with something in the cloud that we call private endpoint. It helps us with our outbound internet access, right? And that's why you have that word there. It's recommended for outbound. You know, we talked about inbound and outbound, right? Something that leaves your resource to go to another resource. So we're not going to work on all of that, right? For now, we are okay with this. And I'm just going to simply click add. And it's going to add that new subnet. So it's adding another new subnet, but this subnet that is adding, you see that Azure Bastion subnet, is not necessarily the default subnet, but a special type of subnet that is used for Azure Bastion. And you can see that its IPv4 address is different from this right here. So that's kind of how we sort of utilize that. Now, if I now want to monitor this, right? So let's go do something. The purpose of deploying this Bastion is to ensure that we can securely access our virtual machine remotely. The virtual machine is like a supercomputer that is created in the cloud. I don't need to have the virtual machine or the computer with me physically. I create it in the cloud. I can utilize it in the cloud. I can share it. I can give access to that virtual machine to so many other users, and then they can also access that virtual machine. Now, let us go and access that virtual machine. Now, when I'm back in here, I'm going to go to something we call connect, because I want to connect remotely into this virtual machine. I want to click on the connect over here at first. I'm going to see that I can connect through an RDP, which is not really safe for production environments, right? Production environment means the final environment where all of this is deployed so that users can actually utilize this for real life purposes, right? So if I come down over here, I'm going to see different options here that I can use to log in. So I can see the Bastion, but let's go through the right route. So I'm going to click Bastion here. And when I select Bastion over here, let's give it a few seconds. It tells me that I can now deploy Bastion, right? Why can I deploy this Bastion? I can deploy it because I configured a subnet, right, to add Bastion that deployed under this virtual network. That's where we're just coming from right now, right? So it tells me all of this key information. And I can now go ahead to say deploy Bastion. If I wanted to configure it manually, I can do that, but we don't need that. We're okay with the default selection. So I can now go ahead and click what? Deploy Azure Bastion. Now, as that is creating, I'm going to open up, I'm going to try and see if I can open up a new page over here. So we're going to be monitoring that deployment. It's deploying. It does take a few minutes to deploy. So I'm going to scoop over here. And let us see what it looks like creating a new virtual network, right? We've looked at this virtual network, how it is utilized. Let us go and see how it is created. So I'm going to go under what we call more services, right, in our Azure cloud environment. And remember, in this Azure cloud environment, we actually have key areas, right? We call them categories. These are the key categorical areas in an Azure cloud environment for different functionalities or levels of cloud functions. So in the case of where we have security, remember we're talking about security all day. I can go to security and I can see some of the key functionalities over here. Now, if you're in a full IT training, right, some of the features that we'll be training you to utilize, for example, are your application security groups that are used closely with something we call a network security group. The application security group enables us to easily group different resources together within a network security group. It also enhances the security for those resources and ensures that those resources can securely communicate with each other under a specific network. So if I had two virtual machines or two supercomputers, right, deployed under the network security group we were talking about earlier on, those two virtual machines can talk and communicate with each other securely because of this application security group. So it is very, very, very important. If you read it, it says you can use application security groups to configure network security as natural extensions of an application structure by arbitrarily grouping them, right? We talked about that, right? And defining network security, because you can utilize, so stuff like that. You understand? So it's very, very important that we also talked about web application framework as well. So we'll cover those things. Remember, I talked about Log Analytics Workspace is used for data collection and a host of all other functionalities. Log Analytics can be used to configure data collection rules. I know these concepts are key, but we don't have too much time to be diving into the explanation of all of these key things. But the Log Analytics, for example, is needed when you're creating a Microsoft Sentinel resource, right? And you also can use your Log Analytics workspaces for things like our virtual remote, Azure remote desktop, which is similar to virtual machines. The Azure virtual desktop is more or less like a simple Windows computer. So whenever you've seen some companies that say, oh, we don't need to send you a laptop. We're just going to give you so and so access, and then you can go in through Citrix or so and so to go and access it. That's an example of a Azure virtual desktop. We also have key areas like application gateway. Application gateway is a form of load balancer that balances traffic across web applications, right? So when you deploy a web application and you need to share the balance of traffic. So say, for example, you have a lot of servers attached to your website, right? And there are peak times that you're going to have traffic. You can apply application gateway as a load balancer to maintain traffic between servers, so that when one server is having a lot of workload, another server can take place. It can switch responsibility to another server to do what? To balance traffic on that website. That is why the concept behind it is called load balancing. You are balancing what? You are balancing the load. And that is why it tells you over here it is used for application level routing, right? That we just talked about it, route and transfer what? Load between the servers, right? So the application gateway is the underlying technology ensuring that is happening, and then doing the load balancing service as well, so that we can do what? Ensure that we achieve what? High availability, resiliency, and scalability. You understand that? That's why you see those words there: scalable, high availability, and stuff like that. So a lot of fun stuff. You can see Microsoft Sentinel that we talked about, right? We can see our Microsoft Defender for cloud. So as a cloud security engineer, we'll be spending a lot of time in the security area here to ensure that you grasp the concept of what is going on as a cloud security engineer in the cloud space, right? We have the Microsoft Entra ID that I've mentioned a lot, right? Formerly called Azure Active Directory. talked about that extensively. We talked about multi-factor authentication as well. So you can see all of those things that I'm mentioning, you start to see them live and direct, right? Your DDoS, right? Your distributed denial of service attacks. You have your key vault. Talk about key vault, where you can securely save secrets, keys, and certificates. You understand? Very, very important. That comes into encryption and cryptography, right? And that's why you see safeguard cryptographic keys and other secrets, as well as certificates used in the cloud. So very, very important aspect over here. When we jump into networking, we talked about network security as well too. So you can see some of those key concepts under here. We talked about our firewalls and firewall manager. You can see that. And what do we see over here? We see a network security group, which is very, 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 very important as well. When we come under network foundation, you can see our bastion, right? We just deployed a bastion. By the way, let us go and check the update to that bastion. You can see still deploying the bastion. It's a big deal, so it takes a few minutes, and that's why I had us redivert our time here to go on as the bastion is successfully deployed over there. So you can see some of the things we talked about when we're looking at the AWS environment, talked about route tables as well too, but I won't delve deep into some of these things so that we're not overloaded with information. We have other things like private links that are important, network interfaces. These are things we cover in the full IT training, our DNS zones, our public or private IP addresses, our NAT gateways that we're looking at when we were configuring a subnet as well. We look at our peerings. We talk about virtual network peering. We can launch it from over there. We have our VPN gateways, also called the virtual network gateways, which enables communication between cloud resources and physical resources or on-premise resources. You understand? So you can see that over there, right? It tells you, it connects your on-premises networks to your Azure cloud environment. So which means a company can work in an hybrid cloud environment where they have their private data center and their public data, the public cloud service provider such as Azure. So a company can have resources in the Azure over here, such as a virtual machine here and a virtual machine in their physical environment. And they can use things like ExpressRoute and virtual network gateways or VPN gateways. That's why it says VPN gateways. To do what? To establish a connection and flow of data and information between those two quite unique and distinct resources. It enables that through key concepts such as what? Site-to-site VPN, all right? And that's why it says the VPN, or rather, it is a similar way that you set up to connect to a remote branch office. This connectivity is secure and uses industry standard protocols, all right? And now, we go down over here, we can see our load balancers, right? We typically have two types of load balancers in the Azure cloud. We have our Azure load balancer that can be used across, say, for example, virtual machines, right? You want to have a scalable virtual machine environment where you have virtual machines that also do what? They balance the load on them. You can provision, configure, and deploy a load balancer, put it behind the virtual machine so that what? So that you can share the responsibility of whatever is coming into that virtual machine. So say, for example, a virtual machine is using heavy databases, right? And you're reaching out to that virtual machine. You can have multiple instances of virtual machine and configure a load balance across those virtual machines. This will mean you can plug in, because you can actually control the amount of virtual machines that you want to be around your load balancer, right? So let's say you have 5. You can say I want a maximum of 5 load balancers and a minimum. That means at minimum, two virtual machines should be working together to share responsibility of traffic coming into them. They are going to be identical, and that's why they are called virtual machine instances. It's a virtual machine that has an instance of itself physically in however amount you want it. So I can say when we are in a peak period, when we are busy and our databases are receiving a lot of, start to increase the virtual machine automatically. So it starts going from 2 virtual machines. It now sees that the 2 virtual machines are very busy, right? The databases are easy. People are storing a lot of data, uploading, like they're storing things on their Instagram, but they don't even know where the information is being uploaded to. Then it comes and it creates automatically another virtual machine, another supercomputer, and starts putting in that load in there, right? And that's what load balancer does, it ensures that you have what we call high availability. Why is it using the word high availability? It's using the word high availability to ensure that even during peak periods, your organization will not suffer crashing or any problematic issues, right? You can see people say, if those of us that took note of what happened with Netflix, right? Just the other day when there was a fight, right? You can see Netflix uses AWS and they had a very hit because they had servers that fell beyond what they could even imagine would happen, right? And that's where load balancers come in. They ensure that you do not experience things like that. Now, this does not mean they were probably using load balancers, but they were probably not expecting that level of traffic. You understand? And so that's why these things, they play a very important role. When you don't know how these things work behind, it sounds funny. It's like, why is that stuff slow? It's because of things like this, right? By putting in load balancers, you ensure that your organization's resources in the cloud have high availability. They are highly available. That's what that word means, right? That's the word, the high availability, but that's what it means, high availability. And scalable, it scales, it goes out. If traffic increases, it goes to 5 to meet the demand. If the demand reduces, it goes back to maybe 2 or 1, whatever you've configured. And that's what some of all of these things do. Now, lastly, let's take a look at virtual networks. Now, as I'm doing that, I'm going to jump in here and I can see a bastion was successfully created. So can you see that? That is beautiful. Now, I'm looking at a supercomputer right here. All right. Now, what I can do is for me to log in remotely, rather than me using what we call a RDP connection, and we saw the RDP connection earlier on, right? Rather than me using this RDP connection, I can use Bastion to securely connect, right? And this is happening because of our virtual networks and subnets that the Bastion uses to work as one. So now I can say that the authentication way I want to use to log in to this virtual machine using the Bastion feature is the VM password, right? If I wanted to do, I can choose a password from a key vault. You see what's going on over here, right? We've talked about key vault, where you can store secrets, you can store keys, and you can store what? Certificates. And over here, you can store your password in there, so you don't even have to remember it, right? We don't need to. So you can store your password and then you can retrieve it from there. But this virtual machine was created with a virtual machine I had in my mind. So I'm not going to choose that option. I'm just going to use the basic function here. And I'm going to put in my password, user name, and then I'm going to pass in my password. Let me retype that just to be sure. And then I can now click connect, and I've clicked this to say open because it's going to actually open this through a secured web browser. You understand? I'm going to say connect. And you can see it just opened up automatically a new web browser. You can see it says connected. And now it's logging me into this supercomputer called a virtual machine. And so rather than me using the RDP feature, what am I now using? I'm using what? Our Azure Bastion. So we're just going to give that a few more minutes, rather a few more seconds. So it's going to take just a few seconds to sort of load up because this virtual machine is actually, it has a very small random access memory. The random access memory determines how fast your virtual machine can work. And I specifically chose that because this is just a sample virtual machine. So let's give it a few seconds. So you can see that it's opening up the virtual machine, right? Which is this is a Windows computer, basically. So I'm accessing this Windows computer, but because it's a supercomputer, we call them Windows servers. You understand? And you see, so if you use a Windows computer, you can see all of those Windows capabilities right there, right? I can launch my Microsoft Edge. I can go into, this is not as beautiful, as fine as a Windows machine, because again, this is a Windows server. It's more powerful. Yeah, organizations can run highly powerful applications, tools, utilities, database systems. They can deploy web applications using what we call Internet Information Servers on this computer, because it's a supercomputer called Windows. That's why I see the word there, Windows server. Why you to be using a simple Windows machine to say Windows 10, it's still a Windows computer, right? I can go to my folder there and I'm going to show you that directly. So over here, I'm going to expand this. and I can use the, let's see, the feature here, view, and then I can say properties. Let's see where the properties are. Let's see if I can remember that. Or we can use the this feature over here. Let's see. Forgive me, I'm not really a Windows guy like that, so I'm trying to look for a simple Windows feature right there. Also, I'm using a Mac computer, so I don't have the capability to easily just click the right hand button. And so we can see all of these different Windows feature over here. But basically what I was looking for is where it tells me information about the Windows PC. Trying to see if I can force myself to launch that information out there. Typically if you just click your right hand button over here, you'll be able to get that information about your computer information. So where it tells you you're using a Windows computer and you have so and so information about these Windows computers. There should be a feature over here that is called properties, but I'm not just able to simply see it. Okay, I got it right there. So over there, it shows us this computer information, right? Let's expand that a little bit. And by the way, this server is slow because it's the cheapest. It's actually a free virtual machine. But it has just 1 gig random access memory. So if I open up the task manager, you see the task manager has just 1 gig random access memory. But you can see this processor, yeah, this is an Intel Xeon, Xeon or whatever they pronounce that as, with 2.3 gigahertz and 973 MB. And that right there is the RAM. You understand? So it's telling us it's a connection. It's just because it's very, very slow. But that's fine. We just wanted to show you how Azure Bastion works over there. And so now let's take a look at our virtual network lastly before we round up over here. So I'm going to go ahead and click virtual networks because we want to create a new virtual network. Remember, again, we've talked about virtual network, right? And how it is utilized and stuff like that. I'm going to quickly come back over here and try to grab this wording over here so I don't have to type in a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to come back over here. And over here, we need something that is called a subscription, right? To start creating this. We also need a resource group. A resource group is like a virtual folder for classifying and grouping your cloud resources. So I have one over here. I'm going to select that. Then I'm going to provide a virtual network name over here. I'm going to call this VNet. And I can just simply call this VNet2. And then I can choose the region, right? Because these are cloud resources and you can decide or determine which cloud location or region you want to have this created. Now, with organizations, typically they would have their own set of rules on how to choose regions, right? Most organizations can say, well, since we are working in the Eastern branch, we expect you to be using the US East branch, right? So they say go use US East branch. So organizations can say, okay, even though we are based in the US, in the East US, the guys that are going to be utilizing this once we've created this, they are in central US, right? Or south central US, let's say in Dallas or Houston or somewhere like that. And they are going to need to be close to their contact support center. And so they want us to deploy this to the south central. I can now go over here. I can come over here. I can search for the south central, right? And I can search south central. But in this case, we're going to use the west US too, all right? So I'm going to click next. You see, now over here, you can see we deployed what we called an Azure Bastion using a subnet, right? We created an extra subnet in our previous virtual network. Let's flash our mind back. I'm going to quickly jump back there. I'm going to go to the home page over here for the virtual machine. And then I'm going to go into our virtual network here. And then we can see down that this virtual network, we have what? We have 2 subnets, right? The default subnet and the Azure Bastion subnet. So, and over here, we can see if I wanted to deploy an Azure Bastion right now under this virtual network, as opposed to doing it after the virtual network was created, right? That is configuring post-deployment, right? After the deployment, that's what we did over here. It's a post-deployment configuration that we did. Now here we are doing a pre-deployment configuration that is called what? It's called a provisioning state. This is the state of provisioning your cloud resource before it is deployed. All of these steps we have to go through is what? We are provisioning a different provisioning state. right? And so over here, I can say enable Azure Bastion. Then it tells me, what do you want to call this? I can easily just say, call this Azure Bastion 2. Right? It needs a public IP address. I can create a special one. I'll say, no problem, go with this new default one you're creating. At the same vein too, the Azure Firewall, if I wanted to create that as well too, I can click it. I can say enable firewall. Then it starts asking that. You can see it's creating a subnet. So basically, if I were to configure this Azure Firewall right now, and I configure this Azure Bastion, and of course, this virtual network also needs what? It also needs its own default subnet. What is happening is that when I deploy this virtual network, it's going to come with 3 subnets with 3 different IP address spaces. Now, the IP address over here, right? You can see this has 2. So this has 2 because one has the default, one has the Azure Bastion. And what is going on over here? We are adding another feature here called Azure Firewall that also needs a subnet and is providing the subnet name over there for us. You understand? And so that is typically how this works. But we're not going to deploy a firewall. We're just going to leave the bastion. And then I can go to IP addresses. And then what do I see? I see that I can add a new subnet if I want. But right now, it's providing us with 3 subnets, like I just mentioned. But because I clicked enable firewall subnet, even though I unchecked it, Azure has already what? Preconceived that notion and selected it for me. And that's why I told you when we deploy it, we'll see what? We'll see 3 subnets. And right now we see the subnet with 3. The default, the one for Azure Bastion, and the one for Azure Firewall. And you can see what is going on over here. They all have different IP address range because they can't work in the same range. That comes into play when we talk about segmentation, right? Different segments for different features under our virtual network. Let's quickly take a look at that again lastly. Let's come over here. Track it down really shortly. I'm going to do a quick search over here. Talks about subnets over here. The subnet enables segmented network what? Structures for fine-grained control. And that is an example of what we are seeing playing out in our very eyes over there. I can then go ahead to say delete that one. I don't want to see. This one I can say, okay, that is fine. I can choose a different IP address range. Even over here, for this right here, I can change to different address space. We're going to leave that the way, but let's say I want to change the name of this subnet. I'll come over here, and I can come over here. You can see the purpose of this subnet is to act as a default for the virtual network. I can come over here, and I can change the subnet name. I'll say subnet 1. And I can click save. And what do we see? It changes that over here. The next, I can go to review to create, or review plus create, and then now I'm ready to deploy that. But we're not going to deploy that because, we're kind of out of time. I think we've almost gone for 2 hours, and I see everyone is still here, so which means everyone is really enjoying it. Apart from, I know Kay had to run along to go pick up his daughter. But that's what is going on over here. All right. So we're going to round this up over here. And let's see. So I'm going to stop this right here. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to stop it so that we can have questions if we have any questions, and then I'll help you answer those questions. But again, as we wrap up over here, thanks everyone for joining. I hope you really enjoyed this session. Again, remember, if you want to join the full SCAR-Stack IT training for this, get in touch with us. You can send us an email at techinfo@scarstacksolution.com. Our email is on the website, and then you can reach out to us to enroll. Do make sure you visit our website. It is scarstacksolution.com. Check it out, and our website actually even has the syllabus, right? If I come over here, I click View IT Trainings, I can go down here to Cloud Security Engineer right here, and I can download a copy of the syllabus to see exactly what we cover in the syllabus, right? We've got introduction to cloud security and CSPM, cyber threat vulnerabilities, all of these things we looked at, and then we can see some of the tools that are utilized. So the syllabuses are there for you to access, to know exactly what you're going to be expecting during the training. Again, remember the training is a 2 months training valued at $800 with a payment plan of $400 per month. So when you come in, if you don't have the full $800, you can jump into the payment plan, pay $400 for the first month, and when before the second month comes again, you pay your balance to complete your full IT training. Again, we talked about how much they earn. They earn a significant amount of money. Cloud security engineers between 161K to 266K. So definitely take advantage of that. Also remember, we also offer other IT trainings, right? We can see our IT trainings in cybersecurity as well, IT training as a cloud solution engineer or cloud solution architect, and then our cloud security engineer. We also have our full stack engineers. These are for the coders, right? The developers have been writing code. I have about 16 years professional experience writing code, and as well as 10 years experience in the Azure and AWS field as well. Thanks once more for joining. My name is Olu, and I look forward to seeing everyone. But yeah, does anyone have a question?
Yeah, quick one.
Oh yeah, sure, no problem. Yes.
So, is cybersecurity like a little? I know it's on its own, but can it be like a part of the cloud security?
Yes.
Or
Yes, you understand. While traditionally cybersecurity does not have to do with the cloud, and there are a lot of people that have job roles that have nothing to do with the cloud. You understand? But because the move to the cloud, right, over time, a lot of companies over the years, everybody's going to the cloud, right? And so what happens is there needs to be a need to cover those cybersecurity goals in the cloud as well as protect the cloud generally. And that's where cloud security comes in. It covers a little bit of cybersecurity because some of those concepts we are seeing in the cloud, such as our firewall, our DDoS attack, our CM tools, our security information and event management, security orchestration, automation, response, identity and access management. All of these things that we see normally in cybersecurity, we also see them in the cloud, right? Endpoint detection response, cyber threats, we also see them in the cloud. So the cybersecurity generally now, if anybody's teaching cybersecurity, they would likely touch cloud security because some will come out and when they start seeing cybersecurity jobs, they start telling you, you start seeing cloud, you must be aware of AWS, you must know how to use AWS, Azure, you understand, knowing how to defend our resources that we have in the cloud. So natively speaking, right, natively or traditionally speaking, cybersecurity just used to be cybersecurity, but now cybersecurity now has to include and tolerate cloud security because organizations are moving some of those things that they secure traditionally on premises, they are now securing them in the cloud as well too. You understand? So, but there are so many IT trainings that don't cover that for cybersecurity. Our own cybersecurity training even covers that. So whether you're going from cybersecurity or cloud security, you are covered on that. The biggest advantage the cloud security has is that it is the most modernized area of cybersecurity that companies are focusing on right now. You understand? And
right.
So while it is like with ScarStack solution, right? When you get the full training, you'll be having a 70% cloud security, we'll cover everything, and then we'll bring in like 30 to 40% of the real cybersecurity that has nothing to do with the cloud. You understand? And thereby, you are now infused with those two goals together. You get what I mean?
Okay. So, okay, yes. Sorry, I get that. But so that means a combination of cloud security engineering and the cyber security engineer is the perfect combination.
Yes, you understand. Not only that, but even if you are doing it is inescapable, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, right.
As a cloud security engineer, you're already delving with cybersecurity natively and in the cloud. You understand?
Yes.
You get the right training. That's why I want. You see this cloud security training, some of the tools you're seeing here, Wireshark, Nessus, Nmap, some of these tools there, they are used for cybersecurity training as well too. You understand?
Okay. Yes.
Over here, you start seeing some of those tools over here too. We see Zscaler, we see Splunk, we see the Nessus. We're just taking a look at Kibana. You understand? And
okay. So the reason why I'm asking is so now because if I'm trying to do the cloud engineering and the cyber security as a full courses, because going into the cloud engineering, you're just going to take a little part of the cyber security, right?
Cloud security, rather.
So yes.
Yeah, cloud security. Yeah. So, because as a cloud solution architect, right? Or cloud,
yes, already.
you'll be touching cloud security, you understand? But you won't touch it as extensively, deep, and broad, you understand? And we won't cover anything cyber security, you understand? Because that's not the role of a cloud solution architect. So a cloud solution architect somewhat knows about security, you understand? But not as in-depth as the cloud security engineer. That's why they are both in the cloud, but yes, cloud solution architect and cloud security architect.
Okay.
You understand?
Yes. Okay. So yes. So for I don't really need the cyber security.
No, you don't. As a cloud,
the cloud solution architect.
Yes, you definitely don't have any business. You understand? However, because of your knowledge as your administrator, right? Because you were in my full training, right? You remember we're talking about security, Bastion, virtual network, right? A part of cloud security. So you're aware of it, you understand?
Yes.
You work with Defender too, you work with monitoring, so you're aware of those things, but the cloud security goes in depth, you understand? Full time. It's just like we did during your training, you covered DevOps, right? But we covered the essential. Now, when you come for a DevOps engineer training, you go deep, you understand? And that is the key difference. Does that
make sense? Thank you very much. Thank you.
So definitely, if people come to me and they recommend, oh, what do I do? Do I go for cybersecurity or cloud security? I always advise them to go for cloud security because that's the more modernized approach right now. You understand?
Right.
And the cloud security also covers cybersecurity as well. So I also offer that. Now, if someone is already someone already has cybersecurity background too, you understand? Because there are so many cybersecurity people that don't know anything about cloud security. You understand?
Right.
Training that is good for them too. If you're a cloud solution architect, just like your own training as well, too, that you do successfully, and you want to delve into security in depth, you understand? You can now jump into cloud security. You understand? It's emerging. Cloud security actually pays slightly more than our cloud solution architect. And that's why cloud solution architect is seen as the second best paid job in the Azure environment, just right after cloud security. And so you understand, that's how the structure is. And I'll just show you one last thing right here as we wrap up. I believe it should be somewhere around over here. Let's see, Azure job role types. So let's take a look at that. Azure job role types. So we'll come here, right? We start seeing some different roles. And, I probably showed you this already during the beginning of your full IT training. We see the normal Microsoft Azure administrator, right? And then we now see the Microsoft Azure Solution Architect, which you did, right? And
yes.
That's much more slightly bigger than this. That's why it comes over here and tells you they are the second most highly paid professional. You understand? And so that's how it sort of works. Yeah. So hopefully that answered your question.
All right. Thank you so much.
Sure, no problem. Thanks. If there's no more questions from anyone, we'll round up now. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, guys, for being in here. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in our training. Okay? Thanks, everyone.
Quick one last question. When next is the next class time?
Probably looking at next full training.
Yes.
So the IT trainings, we've structured things a little bit right now. Now we're starting every new month. You understand?
Every new month. Okay.
IT trainings are for 2 months.
The cloud engineering every month. You start one class every month.
All of them. You understand? And we have different time frame availability for them. You understand? We already have, like right now, people that want to join in December, we already have I think 14. And I think I'm going to have 2 more people enroll today, pay and enroll today. You understand? So and typically the structure is when they come in over here and they click view IT trainings and they come down here. Say, for example, they wanted to sign up for a cloud security engineer role. They click enroll now. It takes them to the enrollment page, gives them details. Then they can now click on enroll. So if you wanted to start in December, you click December, the class December 2, because that's probably like a Monday. You understand? We have 3 time slots.
Okay.
You want to go for 4 p.m.
I'm coming. Give me a minute. I'm almost done, guys.
Yeah. So you can select 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And then you see the price there for 1 month. If you want to go for the full 2 months and just pay and not have to worry, you understand? You select quantity of 2 and then you sign up. So you'll be signing up for December and January, which will make your full 2 months. If you want to go on the payment plan, you first select 1. So that will secure your first month of December. And then as January is approaching for you to complete your remaining 1 month, you come back in here to pay again. So that's pretty much the enrollment structure.
Okay, thank you so much.
As you can see, the dates are there if you want to start on any month. You understand?
Yeah.
Structured in a way where people don't have to wait forever, right? Back in the days,
Right.
you'd have to
That's,
wait.
That's
right?
cool.
Yeah, you have to wait. So now you can start every month, and then spread a lot of time to be able to accommodate all of those classes. Yeah. All right. Thanks. Those are very good and key questions. You understand? So if anyone does not have any more questions, I'll wrap up over here. Thanks everyone for joining. And, looking forward to. Do you have any more questions? Okay, good. Okay. So thanks everyone, and we're going to see you in our next session. All right. Thanks everyone.